Call to order the regular council meeting of Tuesday, October the 15th. There is an agenda in front of you. I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Councillors Niche and Cunningham, any additions or deletions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have resolutions and recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. This came from the previous Committee of the Whole, the last Committee of the Whole meeting, with a recommendation that Council approve the Financial Stability and Resilience Policy, Government 30-2024. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Skelton-Morven, is there a seconder? Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Councillor Adey.
Since I might be the reason we're dealing with it tonight instead of last time. In seeking to have us take a pause just to think through it, not so much for ourselves, but for the public to have a chance to absorb it and think through it, those who have attended to it. So we took the delay. In the meantime, when I had a chance to talk to people, I took it to find out what people think. And I don't think what I heard from them is any surprise, really. I will, before I explore that, just ask if anything came the city's way as a result of that.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not received anything in regards to this.
Thank you.
So I'm left with my own straw poll. So not surprising to me, there's some people are dead set against it. They say there's been enough tax increases. They don't like taxes. In some cases, they're quite emphatic that there must be other sources of revenue. And in the spirit of that comment, obviously we continue to pursue other sources of revenue and need to do so energetically and visibly in order to be seen to be doing our part. On the other hand, there are people who see the value of doing something like this, partly because inflation is a reality. We know it's going to happen. So if we pass a zero increase budget, we're actually losing ground against the cost of doing business. And in that same spirit, I've been doing this for 6 years now, going on 7, and we did have a run of zeros, and there was some restlessness around that trend from around the table, and in the end, reality hit, and we had a couple of years of pretty significant numbers, and if you prorate those, the total over the 6 or 7 years, you end up with something resembling the cost of living increases we're being asked to implement as a matter of policy. So there are people who see the logic behind it, and I have to say that's where I stand. Also, I think there is certainly a very compelling argument to be made for keeping up with at least the cost of living increases, inflation increases. So I do see it that way. I do think the implications are that if you're going to build in a predictable but relentless tax increase, regardless of how limited, it does mean that you have to focus more clearly and visibly on accountability for what you're doing with the money, and not to say that anybody's letting us down in that regard, but I just think it's a reality that it creates that responsibility to be as accountable as you possibly can and as transparent as you possibly can. And I think it also means that you have to live up to the argument that you need to continue to pursue all other revenues. I do wonder what happens in terms of a policy like this if over time we achieve some successes along the lines of the RBA, and whether that changes the picture at all. For the purposes of what we're doing tonight, we're looking for a policy approval, and policy is not the same as a resolution. I understand that. but I think those are all the sort of points that come to mind when I consider this.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
I was away when this was brought to council the last time, so I didn't get to speak about it. So, you know, the whole thing about predictability, and I mean, you're basically building in a tax increase, and I feel that you know, as much as I understand the reasoning behind it, you know, I think that every budget needs to be scrutinized, and I think every budget is different because of, you know, you don't know what we're going to get. We don't know if we're going to have RBA. You don't know if the port cap's going to change, and I have a hard time building in a predictable tax increase, and I don't agree with it. I think that, and not that it's saying that I won't agree to a 2.5% increase every year when it comes, but I just feel that if you just throw a number of 2.5 out there every time, then, you know, it's not putting our staff to task to make a budget that comes in at zero, and if it needs to be 2.5% increase, it is. And so for that reasoning, I can't support it.
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, I've talked to different age group, I guess. You know, putting it bluntly, seniors on fixed income and things like that. And most of them are against this. You know, like what you're doing here is you're not starting out your budget process at zero. You're starting at 2.5% and going from there. And I just have trouble supporting it when I know how much it's going to affect a lot of seniors.
Councillor Randawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, mostly my colleagues already said, uh, like I understand the inflation and cost of living increase every year, but our community is different. Like old days, like when pulp mill was down, and our community supported that mill was right. Other communities don't have to that time. Now, pulp mill like Watson Land start making money for our community. So every year will be different revenue will coming there. So I rather like go like year by year instead of making policy 2.5. So if we make more money from there or from City West, we have assets all over there. So we get revenue from somewhere else, like then our community might get instead of increase, they should get some break on tax that year. So I'm not in support of making any policy.
Thank you. Councillor Forrester.
Thanks. I think maybe I interpreted it maybe a little bit differently. And I just would like to check my understanding. My understanding is that we would set this out if we approved it, which would allow some people to budget because they would expect that there would be a modest increase each year. But if we found additional money, we would be able to change that policy at the time of the budget and say, no, maybe we're not doing it as 2.5, maybe we're able to do the budget as a 1.5. But it was allowing everyday people to be able to budget a bit better. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that is an accurate interpretation. You know, it's a policy. It's not. It's a guide, right? And council's always free to override its policy, right? It's setting out the purpose was to set out just an expectation that costs go up every year, and you can, unless you find a way to do something to stop doing something or find a way to do it a lot cheaper, you can anticipate that if it costs more to heat the swimming pool, we're going to have to up the taxes so that we can keep the swimming pool heated. So I think that's a fair interpretation. Every single budget is a unique budget that will come out to a number based on whatever council agrees.
So if I understand correctly, it wouldn't be that the budget would be planned each year with an expectation that additional money is there. They would still
Correct.
have to go through the same
All the
rigorous
same process.
we already
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Skelton Moore.
I think this discussion itself is making a case for the policy. It's removing the political element to an extent. I think the automation I think is important. As much as we'd like to continue to keep it as a row of zeros, I have to agree with Councillor Eady, having been on this council at the same time, watching the line of zeros and then a jump to 15%, which would have been significantly higher if we didn't have dividends from Legacy Inc. or loan repayments from City West. So to be able to offset a lot of those costs, I mean, we are looking for alternative means of revenues. And I think with the policy and the aspect that is open and they're still up to scrutiny every year, but I think just setting the expectation in advance so people have a mental note and we're not blindsiding people all of a sudden with a 15 or a 20+% increase. Just for folks at home that might be watching, I mentioned the dividends from Legacy Inc. for a reason because what was perceived as a catastrophic increase could have added another 32% and change, if I recall correctly, potentially 40 plus, where it would have been, you know, in the 40s, 50s, and 60% increases instead of 15. So having these alternative revenue generating tools, I think, is going to be really important to our long-term success. But looking at something like this, and as Mayor Pond described, it's the cost of operating a city or just operating anything, a business, your house, your home insurance goes up, everything else goes up. Unless we find an alternative means of doing so, which we're working on that. I think we're getting to a point of where revenues have significantly offset what would have been pretty horrific tax increases. But looking at this piece is giving the staff, the team, the tools that they need, and removing an aspect. I'll emphasize an aspect of the political element, because the discussions like these, you know, irregardless, you know, facts don't really care about what we're doing politically or what we think we should do. The cost will continue to go up one way or another. So whether we get that from alternative revenues or through taxes, I think this incremental increase people can plan long term in advance.
Councillor Niche.
Yeah, you know, again, I'm just trying to use a little bit of common sense on this and say, like, if the grocery store, the insurance company, and everyone else came and said to you, well, we might increase your stuff 2.5% every year. Just be prepared for that. But it could be more. You know, it's not going to be less. To me, that logic just doesn't make sense. Like, I think we need to look at every budget and scrutinize every budget because, you know, every 2.5% is an impact on someone. You know, my thoughts on property tax have changed a lot over the years, and you know, it's not that I'm opposed to a 2.5% increase at some point. I'm opposed to putting a policy in place that says, well, we're going to do the 2.5, you know, if you want. Well, why don't we scrutinize every budget every time? Because we don't know what every budget's going to bring. Every budget is going to be different, and for us to not, like, if your insurance company and your grocery store said to you every day or every year said, well, you know, we'll probably just do a 2.5% increase every time. They're not going to be happy with that. And no one's going to be happy about this. I think people expect taxes to go up. So I think people are going to expect a 2.5% increase regardless. So to put a policy in place, what it's doing is it's allowing the staff to increase everything 2.5% and more possibly. And I think that every year the staff has to look at it and they have to scrutinize it before it even comes to us. And from that point, then we can look at it further and say, well, you know, I mean, we all know that we could increase our taxes by 100% and it still wouldn't be enough. But, you know, at the end of the day, we have to, you know, if we have to increase it 2.5%, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I just don't think that there should be a policy in place.
Just for clarity, and it's the smallest point, but we're talking 2%. I don't know how the 0.5 got added, but Councillor Cunningham.
By putting a policy in place like this, if we get added income, if the caps are removed, the pilt's settled, or something like that, we have no choice. The policy's there. It's got to go up 2.5%.
Oh no.
No?
Every single budget will be presented to council as a unique item. This just starts the discussion, right? This is our policy, but it's our policy. We can change it anytime we want. I'm not arguing in favor of it or against it at this point in time. I'm just saying it is only a policy. It's not a law. It's not a bylaw. It's not anything like that.
So you're saying that it's not going to be an automatic 2.5% increase every year?
2%, no. But it's a starting place for staff. The staff will have to always present the 5-year plan, the budget, everything that everybody's talking about doesn't go away. But so for example, let's just start. We around this table know we are about $20 million shy of being self-funding. That's with the RVA. About $20 million. We know that a good road budget that would, if you just take the amount of road we have and calculate how long a surface lasts and divide by the amount of road that we have and how, we should be spent at about $8 million a year on paving. We've been very successful in the last little while of moving that all the way up to $2 million a year. There's a $6 million annual gap on our paving. So we're a long way from the place where, oops, we've got too much money coming in. I would love that we get to that place. Quite frankly, whether the policy passes or not, it's not going to change a great deal. So I don't think it's worth a lot of our time because all of those processes will still have to happen. I think the intent of behind this was to set a guide for staff when they start to say, we acknowledge that as costs rise, you're going to have to build some of those in. You're still going to have to come in front of this council and fight for every piece of it in all the normal ways. Dr. Buchan.
Thank you, Your Worship. We don't have a municipal cost price index. We have a consumer price index, which doesn't reflect what municipalities pay for buying their basket of goods. If we did, this could have been rewritten to say, in part, to say the baseline is whatever the annual increase is in the municipal costs. That is the same thing as saying a zero-based budget for what we're spending, because with inflation each year, when there's inflation, our dollar is worth less, and therefore, in order to maintain service levels, we have to have that increase. So that's what this is in part trying to get towards. In part, it's a way of saying, let's not think about as a goal having a zero-based budget, because that's actually a reduction each year. That's what got that is what has had some municipalities get into trouble. There was a municipality that was, quite public last year in terms of having a combined increase of somewhere around 35%, because they had really followed the zero-based budgeting, goal without inflation. So it's trying to avoid that in part. But there's other parts of this, and I didn't write this, so I may be butchering this, and I'll invite Dr. Bauman to correct me, please, or augment where she feels it's necessary. But there's other parts of this which are speaking to what we do with non-market increases and putting some of that aside for asset management, so we don't get stuck in those bugaboos, and we smooth out the bumps. And it also says, and it might be more if our costs are more. I think it's really the way I read this is it's about having an expectation that we're going to have costs of living increases every year. So we're going to have at a minimum a zero-based budget in real terms. Director Bauman, what do you need to correct from what I just said?
Director Bauman.
Actually, you summarized it fairly well. It really was just to smooth out the bumps. If there is any new revenue that comes in, as the mayor has pointed out, we will still come forward and say, look, we got a huge injection of revenue. We can offset some of these things. The other thing is too, when over 50% of your budget is actually made up in contractual obligations for staff, and you don't have a union, a collective agreement that is passed at a 0%. It's very difficult to go ahead and propose a 0% unless there's new revenues coming in, unless there are user fee increases to offset the increase in costs. For example, the municipal price index that Dr. Buchan referenced, the basket of goods that a municipality deals with includes asphalt. There is no consumer price index that includes asphalt because us as household owners don't actually purchase such things. So and these types of expenditures are quite expensive. You can all tell from just by virtue of the 1/3 big project that we're doing of our infrastructure, pipe and the cost of fill, it is extremely expensive. This was really just to, the minimums were really just to help provide a bit of predictability for people, only so that they can help budget for themselves. It is not a guarantee that what will come forward year after year would be a 2%. The 0.5%, Mr. Mayor, is actually in the financial stability program. It is with relation to the capital budget, and it was only for 5 years in this policy until we actually had built up basically a contribution, a meaningful contribution every single year after 5 years to be able to put towards asset management, recognizing that we could find ourselves in periods of instability with some of our major terminal operators. There are plenty of communities right now that are going through some fairly significant upheaval, just like the city of Prince Rupert did when the pulp mill went down. Powell River's pulp mill's going down. Houston, I believe, is having some issues. Prince George has lost one of their sawmills. So these translate sometimes if somebody doesn't come in and buy those particular operations and continue to pay taxes, there is a possibility of a tax sale, just like we experienced. It's very real possibility that the municipality could become the owner of said operation, as we have experienced ourselves. So our budget right now with our major industrial terminal operators is 40% funded. Our taxes are 40% made up of those major industrial operators. To continue to add that as an injection for operations for the people that just live here today and not think about the people that maybe live here in 5 years, if potentially some major upheaval happens and those major industrial operators stop paying their taxes, for instance, it's a risk. That would be irresponsible for us to continue to add to our budget nothing but major industrial taxpayers. So the non-market change piece that was in this financial stability policy was really to protect against some of the risk by putting away for capital, which are traditionally one-time type expenditures. We're obviously in a period right now where it seems like we're always doing these large expenditures, but we are in a period of renewal just by virtue of the recession that we had. So that is part of the reason that component is in the financial stability, by having any new future non-market change from major industrial taxpayers going into capital reserves, capital projects. So we have contributory funding for things like the grants that we have been able to get from the senior levels of government. So we can contribute to those things without having to raise fees and taxes in large spikes, which are completely not understandable by the general taxpayer on a year-to-year basis. So we're proposing just a smoothing as a baseline, because in part our collective agreements are not zeros. They are an increase. The cost of providing services do increase. So we're just trying to message, hopefully through council, that at a minimum about 2%, and for a period of 5 years, an extra 0.5% will go into the budget. That's not to say that if we have some more money, that we won't happily come to council and say, we don't actually need to use all of this, and it's up to you now whether or not you want to still add that 2% and transfer it to capital reserves as a bit of a bonus. So that is how it will go forward.
Thank you. It would be worth explaining non-market adjustments.
So non-market change is anything that happens that isn't affected by just the market from transactional sales through the act of selling and purchasing. So, for example, you can have positive non-market change when a new house is built. So that is a brand new item to tax. From an industrial point of view, it's when there's an industrial build that is erected, and now that is a new item to tax. And that, when I say major industrial, that is a separate class. So same thing would happen with light industrial. If a business was built, that's a new item to tax. Conversely, there can be negative non-market change as well. This would be things like if there's a fire, unfortunately, or if a building is torn down, then there is no more item to tax. It really is just the land. Another item of positive non-market change too is when you do modifications to your own house and you take out a building permit. BC Assessment finds out the value of the building permit, and then they assess a non-market change component. So that is just more value that can contribute to the taxation pool.
Yep. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, listening to some of the concerns that Council has expressed, in particular about not wanting this policy to be deemed as a rule rather than as a policy guide, I'm going to suggest an additional clause, which may help. And I would suggest this go under 1.0 as an item C. This policy directs how budgets are prepared for council review. Council will consider this policy and draft budgets, but will adopt each budget based on the specific financial conditions at the time.
There you go. I have a mover and a seconder, correct? I think that's where I'm at. So is there somebody that would like to move the addition of that as an amendment? Councillor Skelton Morvan and Councillor Adey. So just to be clear, we're talking, I think you're clear, but we're just talking about, question is, do you want to add in that line? Can you read it again, Dr. Buchan?
This policy directs how budgets are prepared for council review. Council will consider this policy and draft budgets, but may adopt each budget based on the specific financial conditions at the time. So it leaves open the fact that council looks at, it makes it clear that council will review it each one and can do what it wants based on what it thinks is best at the time.
Okay, so that's the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? All in, sorry, Councillor Adey.
Just to point out that I think what you're putting into words on a piece of paper is this situation that actually is the rules for how these things would work anyway. Okay.
All in favor of the amendment? Any opposed to the amendment? Councillors Nish and Randawa are opposed. It passes. All right, are we ready? Councillor Adey.
Yeah, it might be a little bit out of sequence, but I think most of what I was going to say is still relevant. I think what I'll struggle, but I'll try and make it relevant. I think I was going to correct the 2.5%, so that's been taken care of.
Yeah.
We should acknowledge a couple of things. One is that there is a budget coming. Let's advertise it on the 21st. Next Monday, there'll be a committee of the whole meeting to introduce the proposed budget for this year. And I think we should be aware that for example, and I don't, full disclosure, I do not have a number that I know is coming, but I can imagine, for example, let's say it comes out and we're looking at a 5% increase. This discussion becomes a bit of a moot discussion at that point. And I think it really only sort of relates to those times when you could conceivably find a way to be under 2.5%. So I wanted to make that point. The other point I want to make, I want to acknowledge what I think is the public's tolerance for things like this, or perhaps lack of tolerance is a better way of saying it. It's easy to find fault with how the city does business and how services are delivered, and we're all familiar with Facebook threads that have a great deal of energy and discourse on things like that. And it's important not to pay too much attention to that, but I do think that in a time when people are, as we are, frustrated with the water quality and the inconsistency of it, and we know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not quite around the corner. And there's, I think, an undercurrent of public opinion that is demanding some movement in terms of the port and the tax cap of the PILT, or some alternative to those things that make those issues good. So there is a frustration there. So in the context of a frustrated public, doing something like this, I think, could be an irritant to that. And I think we need to acknowledge that. At the same time, I think that on the one hand, we're here to represent. And if that's the mood out there, we need to represent that and make decisions that respect that. On the other hand, we're elected to make hard decisions despite some of those things. And here we are, faced with a choice that feels a little bit like that. So I think I'm still in a place where logic tells me that in the foreseeable future, we can anticipate 2.5%, maybe more, just because of what happens in terms of the cost of doing business. And I'll take Councillor Nish's point that in reality, we'd be ignoring our responsibility if we didn't do exactly what he's suggesting, and that is scrutinize each and every budget. I think the only concern, and I think what he's trying to say is, and I felt this too, is that there needs to not be an assumption that we can, in terms of putting budgets together, assume the 2.5 as a planning reality. We still need to be aiming to be as efficient as we possibly can and as reasonable as we possibly can. And the numbers will turn out to be what the numbers are. And then we will have to make a decision. So that's I don't think I'm expressing it incredibly clearly, but that's where I stand.
Councillor Cunningham.
Just a question for Director Bombin. What's the CUPE contract figure each year?
Director Bombin. I'm going directly over to.
Next year, the QP increases 2%.
Yeah. So, Councillor Skelton-Morvan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think emphasis on what the policy is called. Imagine if they did this in 1910 and they had a financial stability and resiliency policy. I don't think we'd be making a lot of these hard decisions that we've had to make over this while. And I really want to allude again, whether I'm repeating myself or not, it doesn't matter. I think there's a piece here that, again, the political element comes up. This essentially is not handcuffing us. This is just a guideline and road for us to follow in future councils, so that this is kind of the beginning of a cultural shift and change. It's not a positive one. I would have liked to have zeros. I would have liked to have decreases if we possibly could. And we did that, and people called us idiots and lost it. And there was a huge outrage of our decrease and why we wasted funds and we should be planning for a better future. So no matter what we do, there will be folks that are going to disagree with this. But looking at the intention of this, I think is really important to kind of capture that. It's not handcuffing us to the future. It's then trying to set the stage for what we're going to have to endure while we're also sourcing new revenues and things like that. And having that stability and resiliency, I think, is important. With Director Bombin's notes around the spikes and jumps, those are the ones that I find have really hurt the public significantly. We had a 15% tax increase not too long ago. And those jumps like that for folks that are on fixed income, it's a really tough bridge to cross, and trying to reallocate and do different things like that, which a lot of them end up in debt anyways, and just find no ways of getting ahead. I think looking at this and looking that there is a bar to set and future planning and financial planning for both the city side of things, but also the members of the community. So trying to remove aspects of that political aspect, I think, is important, because the more we go around in circles here, you just hear that political undertone come in again, where we want to do what's right for those that we represent, but also we want to ensure that we're not doing to what previous councilors have done to us, essentially now, and leaving us in this mess in the first place. And that's not to knock the leadership at the time, and I'm sure they came to the same conclusion. It wasn't a reasonable ask to be asking for tax increases when our town was on the verge of bankruptcy and different things like that. I don't think, but for us to do this now and then look at what this looks like in the future, I really think that we need to support this.
Councillor Cunningham.
So I'm hearing the words guideline, policy, things like this. So my understanding was that we're basically saying that we're going to increase taxes to 0.5 for 2 and then 5 for 5 years. Is that what it is, or is it just it's just a guideline for staff to look at?
So I put it more in the realm of guideline. It is our policy. So if the circuit, and particularly with Dr. Buchan's beginning phrase, every single budget is a unique budget. But I think what we're trying to communicate is if we get sudden little wins, those non-market bumps, rather than just using them as an opportunity to gain some political favor or whatever, we'll actually salt that money away so we don't get caught again. Right? Even if we get lucky on something, we'll even out that bump. But if we were at a time where, sorry, I've got to answer your question. But on any given budget, let's just say the circumstances get really awful, and we lose a major employer, and we've got to go back to. That was the era, as you well know, that I was. We slashed those budgets. That $8 million required road budget became $200,000, and so you do it, right? And if you need to, you pass a little motion saying we're deferring our policy. but broadly speaking, we're by this, we are saying culturally this is what we would like to move towards. We understand we're completely underfunded every year, and for quite a long time we're going to have to work towards getting fully funded. And so in that environment, it's not reasonable for people to expect that we'll have a 0% increase when we could be paving more roads. And so let's just be honest about it. Let's recognize that it identifies the times we're in, and meanwhile, Dr. Buchan, as you well know, has a list on his board of all the different places where we might go to fill that $20 million gap. Because quite frankly, whether it's 2% or 2.5 or whatever, is still a long way from making sure that we're paving the roads enough to keep up with roads. And so, we've spent honestly probably way more time on this than the policy deserves, because each and every, and believe me, staff, I'm not suggesting it's not well written or important, and I like it, but we will, no matter what, there will be a budget presented. We will argue over it and look for places to save money and wonder if we can't do something with 2 less people, and we will see if we can't squeeze a little more money into something that we think matters. And And that will happen regardless. Regardless.
So back to my question. Is this a guideline, a policy, or is it gonna be, the budget's gonna start instead of at 0 and then you add up everything to come up, this is gonna be our budget? Is it gonna start at 2.5 and then go from there?
It would start the discussion at 2.5. Right? That's a guideline. It does not bind council to any number at all. But staff has to start somewhere. Right? All right. I think we've beaten this around enough. Are you ready to vote? Did I hear a voice? All in favor? Any opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. It is defeated. Did you catch the opposed votes? Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, council. We will move on. We've got public comments regarding any item on the agenda. Don't think there's any member of the public that wants to come forward and speak. And so I will move on to consent agenda items. In there are council minutes for approval, the regular meeting of September the 9th, the committee of the whole of September the 9th, report from planning with regards to development activity, a report from the fire chief for both August and September, report from the chief financial officer for the July financial report, report from deputy city manager Pucci with regards to the wastewater pilot program, and then correspondent city of Prince George, motion to acknowledge IPV as an epidemic, correspondence request for letter of support from Cane Trails for the expansion of Trans-Canada Trail Network between Edmonton and Prince Rupert, and a request for a proclamation of October as Foster Family Month in British Columbia. And before I even continue on, I have in front of me yet another award. It is an innovation award awarded to the city of Prince Rupert in recognition of your innovative wastewater treatment pilot project, which employs a biofilter-based wetland system through marshland vegetation and soil. We're going to run out of room to put these awards, but congratulations to staff for this really unique report or approach. I know that there was a public information session recently, and I think it was well attended, and people spoke to it and got a lot of questions answered, which was great. And councillors that attended may want to talk to that later in the meeting. And but I encourage members of the public to read the report that is here in the consent agenda, because I think it will also give you some valuable information. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Councillors Nish and Skelton-Morban. Councillor Adey.
Is there an opportunity to ask questions about any aspect of it?
Absolutely.
A point of curiosity, a couple of questions about the development activity report. One is the Third Avenue West proposed mixed-use development of the city core is just identified as Third Avenue West. I'm just wondering whether we're going to propose developing the entire Third Avenue West, or whether there's an actual address associated with that.
I believe it's the old RCMP station, is it not? Oh, no, that'd be a Second Avenue West.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Thank you very much.
And I have another one afterwards.
There we go.
Sorry, the address related to DP 2424 should be 3rd Avenue West, but we don't have an address yet, but it will be 326, I believe, is the project that was proposed for a zoning variance recently with Lac Palams for a mixed-use development.
That wouldn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It would be further along than 3, I think. Anyway. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Adey.
I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
Yeah.
That item, but thanks for the input. The other one is a curiosity. Why would 4 separate demolition permits be issued for 547 McKay Street? Because it's listed there for a demolition permit on 4 separate occasions.
Have we got a,
I'm gonna defer that to the Director of Planning.
all right,
Yes.
Director Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The demolition on Kootenai Street refers to the BC housing complex there. Each demolition permit refers to a different set of buildings. So in order to approve the demolition, the building permit or the building inspectors need to know that it is properly abated for each building rather than waiting until all buildings are abated. So it's just the way that it was administered.
So,
Counselor.
but do they all have the same 547 address on McKay?
Director Pope.
One address was used as sort of an umbrella for there's a number of addresses on the property.
Is that it? Any other questions or comments? Counselor Cunningham.
Okay, I just noticed the incident report for the fire department.
Yep.
Are we now answering ambulance calls again? And if so, are we charging for them like we did at one time and then stopped doing that?
Dr. Buck.
We are answering again. They've paid the invoices that we've sent to them, and they've we understand have staffed provide enough service so that the problem that we were experiencing with having to respond too much has been rectified.
Any other questions? We moved in second. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right, we'll move on. We've got reports. We got a report from the city manager with regards to the strategic plan update recommendation that council adopt the strategic plan update dated October 2024. Can I have a motion to that effect, Councillors Adey and Forrester? Dr. Buchan, did you want to speak to this at all?
No, Your Worship.
All right. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We have a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to development variance permit 2407 for 721 Lotbinier Street. Sorry, this has been the subject. I've been practicing that all day. All right. That council receives this report for information purposes regarding enforcement options for DVP 2407 for 721 Lotbinier Street, which may include, and there's a bunch of options here, but I'll read them out for the public sake. Number one would be a double permit fee in accordance with the City of Prince Rupert Building Bylaw number 3314/2012, Section 22 for works which required a permit under the above referenced bylaw. Or number two could be a City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw number 3462/2021 ticket in the amount of $500 for a first offense, as outlined in the Ticket Information Amendment Bylaw number 3564/2024. Or number three, it could be legal action to remove the offending work, remedial action order. Or it could be number four, which is advise the applicant and request changes to work to reduce or mitigate the new encroachment and submit a new development variance permit application. And or number five, a Section 57 notice on title, a notice on title which observes the condition of work with respect to land or buildings which was completed in contravention of the municipal bylaw. And that council, at the request of the applicant, reconsider the development variance permit application as previously submitted. Can I have a motion to the whole, and then we can deal with amendments or whatever you want to do? I've got Councillor Randhawa and Councillor Adey. Councillor Forster.
So this is the property we've discussed a couple of times.
Correct.
Where work was done without the appropriate permits. My question is, it is you said or after each one, but it says and or. So
yep.
Theoretically, we could do more than one of these. We could just do one. We could do all of them.
Correct. Correct. And for clarity, and I want to be corrected by staff, but I think it was done under permit, but we didn't have the work wasn't even inspected. I thought the work was inspected, but but in the course of inspection, the inspector said, "Have you got a development variance permit for the work?" Is that correct, Director Miller?
Thank
Anybody?
you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that a building permit was issued. However, upon inspection, the building inspectors noted that work had continued that would have required a variance,
Right.
which is where the work paused, a stop work order was issued, and then a variance was applied for.
Dr. Buchan.
I'm going to ask Director Pope.
Director Pope, let's make sure we got the exact facts. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first, work was found to have been done without a building permit. A permit was sought, and then more work was done that was in violation of the permit that had been provided or approved,
Okay,
which
thank you.
required the variance.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarity. That's helpful. Councillor Forster.
Thank you. So my question is, I know this is not the only time in history that this type of an incident has happened. What is there a standard way that it has been consistently dealt with, or has it been all over the place? I'm just wondering because I like consistency. Makes it easier for people to know if you do something wrong, you're going to have a consistent consequence. It's a union value, right? Should be the same punishment for each crime. So I'm just curious, if are we setting a new path, or is there already a path?
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, historically, my understanding is council has been pretty forgiving in the past, and with similar things. And I think some of the frustration that was expressed at the council meeting that this was received was, is do we want to keep on being forgiving, or do we want to have a different standard? And I think council was going towards a different standard, but it is entirely council's decision to make different decisions. Not everyone is the same. I would just suggest that if you do it on the basis of doing your best to do it in good faith, so that it's it's principle based.
Councillor Nish.
Later on in this agenda, we're dealing with the same problem that happened already. So as far as consistency goes, if we're asking somebody further down on the agenda to tear something down that they built without a permit on a Sunday, then I feel we should be doing the exact same thing in this situation.
Councillor Cunningham.
So this was inspected after the work was done and it passed? So it's built to code, not like the carport that is built to code.
Right.
That's farther down.
I want people to hear this answer, because if you're not in the room, they can't see nodding heads. Who would like to respond to that? Director Pope.
So that is correct. The work that had been done that was technically outside of the building permit was inspected because the inspection was done on the work that was covered under the permit, and I believe my understanding is it was to code. That's right.
There you go. Thank you.
So can we, I still think something should be done about this.
Yes.
So can we combine 1 and 2? So there's a
Yes.
financial
Yes.
penalty to this, and this is just the beginning. There is going to be a financial penalty to it, and then further on, if it continues, there will be more financial penalties, or it will, if it still continues down the path, because it does fit into the beautification of the neighborhood and everything else, like you say in this. So I'm just wondering if we could do 1, 2.
So for the sake of people at home, that would involve a double permit fee and a $500 fine first offense under the bylaw. Councillor 80.
I think that somewhere in imposing something of that kind needs to be the step of the applicant having their request reconsidered. Is there a process that the applicant then has to go through to get that before us, so that we can then say yes or no, but here's the attached consequence that Councillor Cunningham's referring to?
Dr. Buchan.
I think the applicant has already done it, has requested a reconsideration, which council has in this time frame to do.
Yeah.
So council can simply reconsider that, and that would not be inconsistent with 1 and 2.
Right. So just again, for the sake of people listening, council at the last dealing with the matter denied the variance permit, which means this work can't exist any longer. And so the question is, can it be brought back to council so that council can, if council wishes, approve the variance permit with some penalties attached? Any other comments from council? And because I will be looking to clarify a motion here at some point. But Councillor Niche.
The only reason why there's a permit is because you got caught.
I've never seen you be so brief. That's very good. Councillor Cunningham.
We've caught other people. I actually got in trouble one time because I thought we should take a chainsaw to the side of a house and cut several feet off it. The house went over height, over width, and we could do nothing about it because it was already built and moved into. We've been lenient a lot of these, but there's a penalty going to be attached to this. So my motion being is that we combine 1 and 2.
Yep.
Because I believe that they've come back. Maybe Director Pope could clarify that with another renew or for another variance.
Yeah, that's what.
That's why it's
yes.
back before us.
Yes.
So I would.
Sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Buchan.
It's back before you on the basis of a request for reconsideration.
Right.
It's the same variance request that you've received before.
Right.
So they're asking you for a second consideration.
So can I make a motion that we combine 1 and 2?
Yes. Yes. So combine 1 and 2. Process question. Can we reconsider this tonight, or would you have it come back?
No, you can reconsider it now. It's
okay.
And I would say you could, if you choose to approve it.
Yes.
It say subject to 1 and 2.
Yes. So I'm looking for the process answer here. Should we just have because I'm sensing, while it may not be unanimous, I'm sensing a direction here. And all right, I'm going to have Councillor Forster ask her question. And then.
So sorry. I'm looking at number 5. What is a Section 57 notice on title again? I'm not.
Yeah. No.
I
don't
know that I'm 100% certain.
Yep.
Whether or not we might want to add that one too.
Dr. Buchan, I'm punch drunk tonight.
Your Worship, Section 57 is Section 57 of the Land Title Act, which allows councils to put a notice on title of a property, which basically says there is something has not been built in accordance with the municipal bylaw, and it typically has health and safety implications. So it's a notice. It doesn't do anything except for potentially get in the way of a sale of the property. To answer your question, would you do that if you had approved the permit and you did 1 and 2? No, because you've given a permission, and for them to complete, they'd have to they'd have to get a final approval.
Councillor Forster.
Thanks. That helped that one. I have 2 more questions. My next one: how much is a permit fee? So if we're talking about a double permit fee, are we talking about, just for the public, are we talking about it's now $100 instead of $50? Are we talking about it being $20 instead of $10? What?
Good question.
What is that penalty going to look like?
Director Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is in the range of 1 to 150, 100 to 150.
The actual fee itself.
Yeah, the actual fee is
and
usually
so
within that range, and so you double that. So around. Yeah.
So the total penalty, if we did 1 and 2, would be less than $1,000. Is that what I'm
yes
hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Is there an option that's not on here where there's a paper trail of this, so that then if, say, in 5 years this same owner goes and does something again, despite having had a penalty, we are tracking that this is not their first time? I don't know if that's
Dr.
something that we
Buckley.
do. What about if they move?
Yeah.
We could put a note in the property file. It doesn't guarantee that property file is tied to other applications the owner might make. It just means if we go look in there, we would see it.
Yeah. Okay. I've got Councillor 80 and then Councillor Nish.
Just to follow up on the Section 57, would that impact the CMHC approval of a sale? Is that what you were was being referred to when it might get in the way of a sale?
Dr. Buckley?
Often, when a property is going through a sale, lawyers will take a look at the property title, see if there's any charges or liens. They'll want to clear mortgages. If there is something on there like a right of first refusal or Section 57 or rent clause, they're going to go, what's that? Because there could be financial implications on the use and enjoyment of the property for the purchaser, and the lawyer's job is to make sure the owners are fully informed. Sometimes it chases away sales.
Councillor Nish.
Just a point that was just raised by Council Forster about future work being done by the same person. Well, from my understanding, there's actually also a deck that's been built that isn't in this variance that would also require another variance that was built also on city property. So this is not a one-off. From my understanding, there would have to be another variance that will have to come to us for the illegally built deck that is built into the right-of-ways and into the city property.
Director Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the variance to the deck, it's considered a minor variance and was thus delegated to staff as per the amendments to the Development Variance Procedures Bylaw approved by Council in June of this year. So based on the factors in that variance, based on the factors outlined in the bylaw, that variance was approved contingent on getting an encroachment agreement. However, just the way that it was built with the attached to the porch enclosure that was done, neither of them will be able to be built or remain in place if the variance that council did not approve remains unapproved.
Okay, I think we've got enough information. Councillor Cunningham has made a motion that that if I can reword it, would be that council reconsider the development variance permit application as previously submitted, approve the development variance permit as previously submitted, and contingent upon 1 and 2, the double permit fee and the ticket in the amount of $500. Councillor Cunningham, is that consistent with what you were saying? And I believe Councillor Randawa, you wanted to second that motion. Okay. Is there any questions about the motion? Just clarification? Any comments on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Nish is opposed. Thank you. Report from the Director of... so I need to pause for a second. For the sake of anybody that's listening, and I don't know if anybody listens, but this is a step. It may not be the step as far as Councillor Nish wants, but it's council saying very clearly that, to your point, Councillor Forster, getting away with nothing and asking for forgiveness afterwards is going to be very expensive and could get more expensive. Is that fair? All right, thank you. Report from Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to retail cannabis application, with a recommendation that Council direct staff to proceed with the application process for 719 2nd Avenue West for 1456412 BC Limited in accordance with the City of Prince Rupert's cannabis retail application policy. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors Nish and Councillors Skelton Morvan. Any discussion? Councillor 80.
Just a question and then a statement. Question I have is that this address appears on list of renovations that have been approved in the development report. I'm curious about whether the renovations that were approved are specific design features relevant to opening up a cannabis shop, which would therefore have been done and approved prior to receiving approval to have a cannabis shop. So that's a question that I have. Maybe we'll go there first and then I'll say my next bit.
Dr. Buck, and I'm going straight to Director Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when we approve a development permit or a building permit, the land use itself is required to conform with our existing bylaws. However, in terms of the actual, whether they have a license for a specific business, as long as it is a commercial, we can approve the work that gets done. So they may be designing it for a cannabis store. However, that does not factor into the code.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Adey.
Then I would just follow up that although I from a personal perspective, I'm ambivalent about these kinds of requests. I think they're complicated from a community perspective. I think at this point we're being asked to push it forward to the point where the public would be allowed to give us some input. So I think it would be fair to advance it on that basis without necessarily being sure of how I feel about it.
Thank you. Councillor Nish.
I was just going to point out to Councillor Adey, I believe that the building is being renovated like inside and out, and you know, there's housing upstairs by the looks of it, and the downstairs is, you know, if it wasn't approved, I'm sure it could be used for any retail purpose. You know, so that's just my personal view.
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, that building had a fire in it. I don't know how long ago. It's been boarded up for years. Just to see it renovated, the apartment, we're going to get an apartment out of it, I believe, upstairs, as well as a retail outlet underneath. But what I did notice today when I did my drive-by is the lot in between it and the next business has an old deep freeze or cooler and a few things in it. So maybe it can be looked at. I'm quite sure it came from the business next door.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. We now have a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to 198 Prince Rupert Boulevard Remedial Action Order. This is what Councillor Nish was referring to earlier. I've got a bit of reading to do here. The recommendation is follows. That Council directs staff to proceed with the remedial action order under Section 75 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the carport removal located at 198 Prince Rupert Boulevard, legally known as PID 013-413-376, Strata Lot 2, District Lot 251, Range 5, Coast District Strata Plan 14, together with an interest in the common property in proportion to the unit entitlement of the strata lot as shown on Form 1 of in brackets, the property, with costs of removal to be placed on the property taxes for the said property, and that council directs staff to provide notice to the property owner in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that council agree that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided for under Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided, staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action order immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Nish, Councillor Skelton-Morvan, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Report from the Director of Development Services and City Planning with regards to Housing Accelerator Fund Housing Action Plan 2024 with a recommendation that Council adopt the Housing Accelerator Action Plan 2024 update as indicated in Attachment 1 and direct staff to begin actioning policy statements as budget and resources permit. Motion, please. Councillor Skelton-Morvan, Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have a report from the Director of Development Services and City Planner with regards to resolution to amend the 2024 5-year financial plan bylaw 3529 with a recommendation that council approve the additions to the financial plan outlined in this report and that the 2024 5-year financial plan be amended accordingly. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Skelton Morvan, Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Council. Comments. Councillor Adie.
I have three things. One is I noted with dismay, and I know it was shared by some of the community, the damage done to the gazebo in the Sunken Gardens. So I want, at the very least, to express my frustration about that and my commiseration with the people who were behind putting that project together. That sucks, as they say in teenage land. I do wonder, in regard, is there any means by which the city can support either the restoration or the protection of that construction in that area? It is a fairly isolated area at night, so it's easy to imagine bad things happening there. I'm just wondering whether there's a thirst on the part of the city to do anything to support protecting that area.
All right. I'm not sure that we're going to have an answer immediately, but I think if Dr. Buchan can take that one away. Fair enough? Yep. Thank you.
So moving on. On Friday, I was in attendance at an event at the Leicester Centre Theatre and Councillor Forster was there also, along with a number of community members and representatives of the port and the board of the Leicester Centre. And the purpose of the event was to, in the spirit of reconciliation, I suppose, have a ceremony of blessing the new seats. I happen to think that is significant that we do that. I think it was a very important thing that happened, because I think, all of the people there and the speakers acknowledged the importance of that building to the community, but it was a way of also acknowledging the land on which it stands. And I think that was really an important thing to do. So on that basis, I appreciated that event happened, and I think it was probably shared by the people in attendance. And my last point is to reflect on the wastewater treatment public information session. You alluded to it earlier. I think it would be fair to say that it was, if knowing that people have strong feelings one way or another about a step that you're taking is a justification for having an information session about it. This information session was fully justified. There were, in fact, strong feelings expressed on both sides, but I do think that it had a great deal of value. And as we see an award, I think the people in the room, in terms of consensus, walk away feeling much the same as the people who've created this award, that this is an initiative that's worth following, not just from a financial point of view, which is one of our interests, but also from the point of view of innovating in a way that works towards a healthier planet. And I think it has value on that basis. Having said that, I think we need to acknowledge that there are voices out there that are less convinced, and it is within everyone's right to form opinions about these things one way or another. So I acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Forster.
Thank you. Couple of things. Wanted to highlight there are two young people in our community. One who reached out to me named Sam Martin, and the other one is Lily Nguyen. These are young people in our community that have been picked out of all of the province. They're taking 100 grade 9 to 12 students to Vancouver for honor choir, and they are fundraising because it's quite expensive for young people to go to Vancouver. So there have been stories they did with Daybreak News as well as the local newspaper. So if anybody has it within themselves to be able to help them, I think these two young people would really appreciate our help for something that we don't often see young people being lifted up to do. A reminder about Election Day. Advanced voting is right now happening at our amazing local library. I'm on the library board, as you know. So quick little plug, check out the amazing things that the library is doing. But no matter who you're voting for, I just encourage everyone to vote. So voting day is coming up. And then, like similar to Councillor 80, I went on Friday to the Leicester Centre thing, but on Saturday I was really quite excited to go to the 51st annual Filipino or Philcan Prince Rupert event. And it was quite great to see that many people in a time right now where we're seeing a lot of the public not being supportive of different communities. In a lot of places in Canada, not so much in our town, we're seeing lines drawn in the sand. And here we have some community members that are coming together to support one another. And so I really think we need to uplift things like that. And one last thing, just a thank you to staff. A community member came to me about a path by the French Immersion School, and staff were able to make it so it was safe for families, so people were no longer falling. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Councillor Cunningham.
Along the lines of the gazebo, on 3rd Avenue in the last week and a half, there's been 2 windows smashed. The barber shop and Shutter Shack. Vandalism seems to be just out of control. I don't know who or what is doing it, but it'd be nice to see a little more patrolling downtown area in whatever hours that they can. I know the RCMP are busy, but you know, just a car driving down the road once in a while might stop something like that. The wastewater management hearing or public hearing was very, very good, very informative. Councillor Neeson, I also went, and there was some strong feelings, but at the end, I think a lot of people walked out of there supporting it. I had quite a few conversations in the parking lot about it, and there was some real positive comments made about it, and that. So it's a wait and see thing, I guess. But at the end of the day, I think it was a good conversation for a lot of people. And on Friday night, although I didn't make it to the PAC, I did make it to the 20th anniversary of a local business here that actually had red carpet going up to the door. I felt like Hollywood almost. The City Furniture had their 20th anniversary. It was quite impressive.
Anything else? Just a couple quick questions or comments. You know, one is around the wastewater. You know, we talk about it so often that we feel like everybody must know about it, but I'm sure there's always somebody new listening. And we are mandated by the federal government. We've run out of time. We have delayed and delayed and delayed, and eventually the piper has to be paid. We can't keep dumping raw sewage into the harbor. And you can argue about whether outfalls are effective or not. Doesn't really matter. Ottawa is going to say you have to treat your sewage, and to do that the traditional way is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. If you look at what has gained so much attention in the media down in North Vancouver with that facility and the cost overruns and the kind of, now we wouldn't need that big a facility, but still very, very expensive to build, but also very expensive to operate. You need people with specific tickets that that are hard to come by and hard to keep. And so this is a pilot project that will test it by putting a few homes on a specific outfall into a artificial but natural wetland system that would handle that treatment of the sewage, and then the water would be redirected back into the outfall and into the ocean. The beauty of the system is, people have rightfully expressed concerns. Well, what if? What if? What if? The beauty of the system is, if it's not working, you just shut it off. The valve that comes from the outfall into that system, you just close it off, and it's pilot project over. And it's not what we're anticipating, but it is a relatively benign way to test something where you've got an easy failsafe to stop it if you need to. Go ahead, Councillor Naish.
I'm just going to point this out because I did point that out at the meeting, and I feel that in the future, when we're talking about these sort of things, it's all about naming and perception, and unfortunately, I think the failure in this project was that it was named Moresby, and people, Moresby is a park.
Right.
It should have been called the Park Avenue Wetland or something. And this is a lesson for us to learn from this, is that a lot of the opposition that first came out there was because everyone's saying it's in a park, and it's not in a park. It's in a lot that's beside Park Avenue. So in the future, if we put another one of these in Seal Cove, let's not call it the Salt Marsh Wetlands, right? Like we have to call it something else. Like we have to,
fair enough,
rename things more appropriately to what they are. And I think if we do that, then it may take care of a few of the people that may have opposition to it.
Fair enough. The other piece that I wanted to speak to, because people are just, again, I don't think we could have talked about it anymore, and yet there's lots of people that seem to be just finding out for the very first time and that has to do with our water pipes and water quality and boil water notices and everything else. And I just think it's really important that we continue to reframe for people that we had a water system that was at the point of failure from top to bottom, and the top was the dam. And so previous councils raised the money to rebuild the dam, and we all remember, while we were rebuilding the dam, we were on lots of boil water advisories, right? The secondary source of water wasn't as good. Standards have changed for Northern Health and the testing and all of those things. And so for 4 years, 5 years, we've been off and on boil water advisories as we fixed the first part of the problem. But that's not the whole problem. There's another part of the problem, and that's the whole distribution system and this raggedy piece of pipe that's in front of us that we constantly refer to. And every time we go into the down ground to dig and replace that and upgrade it, we knock all kinds of things loose, and we have to, once again, I think we can safely predict over the next 3 years, there will be a lot of boil water advisories. And I wish it were different. I really do. But there is no way to get from where we are to clean water without having rebuilt the dam, without rebuilding the distribution system. And then once the distribution system is well underway, we can then talk about the filtration system that'll give us truly clean drinking water, cleaner than it's ever been. But those are steps that are going to take a long time. And I hear people talking about, well, then we should be refunding something or paying for this or paying for that. And as if we're a corporation that earns money somewhere else. The money that we would refund is the money that we would be putting in the ground to fix the pipes. There isn't a second pot of money that comes from that. That's, if anything got us into trouble, it's by trying to do those kinds of things and not getting the job done. Far more important that we get the job done, and I have constantly called people to take some pride in the fact that we're the generation. We swim in a swimming pool that most of us never built or paid for. We skate on an ice rink that most of us never built or paid for. We sit in a performing arts center that most of us never built or paid for. We use an airport, a hospital, all these amenities that were built by previous generations. Many of them at the senior center. And I've talked to them exactly this way and said, now we are going to be the generation that are going to leave behind 100-year brand new functioning water system that that will be delivering clean drinking water without boil water advisories, hopefully for quite a few decades. And that's our role in the advancement of the city of Prince Rupert. And when I talk to the seniors, they're all in. These people that are on fixed incomes or relatively low budgets and are the people that are most vulnerable at boil water advisories are saying, yep, if it's going to build a better Prince Rupert, count me in. And so I know, council, you've heard it said so many times, your eyes must roll over every time you say it, but I'm just shocked at how many people in our community don't understand that that's exactly where we're at. And so you may hear me saying it too many more times. With that, if there's nothing else, I would accept a motion to adjourn. Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Adey, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Meeting is